really want to talk about how I chose Necropolis Immortal and just honestly, how I've been dying not to spoil people. Because, oh my goodness, it's really, really, really tough. Okay, so how I chose Necropolis Immortal. This time, I really learned my lesson from SOTR, and I read a lot of the novel before I started translating it. In fact, I read 1,300 chapters of the novel before I was like, okay, for sure, this is it. And in fact, what really sealed the deal is something that the sponsors will be able to read right now. It's chapter, I think 68 or something. There's a philosophical question that comes up, and I was like, whoa, this is kind of deep for a web novel. Okay, I think this is it. I'm gonna do this novel. And I chose this, yes, despite it being a ridiculously long novel. Cookie, it's not stupidly long, because the author shows really clear evidence of planning and thoughtful character and plot development for Necropolis Immortal. Now, I have some folks joining me, I think from Twitter and just real life, and might not understand why this is such a big deal. It's like, yeah, it's a book. Shouldn't authors plan and outline stuff? Yes, technically. But in the world of web novels, which is what I operate in, which is what Shanks and, in fact, some of my Moonquill friends operate in as well, that's not always the case. So I'm a translator. I translate the Chinese web novels into English. And what happens is that authors essentially are paid by word count. So once an author has a hit on their hands, the most logical choice is, of course, to pad things out, to make it stretch on as long as possible, because that's how they're bringing home the bacon. So you've got filler and padding. The other thing is, so how the industry works is that there is no traditional publishing industry in China. That's just not how things developed. What it happens is that everything developed in an online serialized format. So daily updates. So you think, okay, so like a chapter a day and some padding, some filler. Okay. No. I'm talking like 3 chapters a day or 5 chapters a day. Essentially, you could be churning out like 10,000 words a day. That's just completely nuts in terms of everything, really. Quality writing, character development, planning out and plot, everything. You're just basically writing what comes in your mind, usually. So for me to find an author that showed clear evidence of outlining and thoughtful development, and in fact, he has actually taken days off where he writes an announcement to his readers saying, hey guys, sorry, no chapters today because I don't like where the story is going. I don't think my outline is strong enough for the next arc. And I was like, whoa, respect. Because he literally is not earning anything that day. Nothing. Because he didn't put anything out, so no income. So that was one thing. And then just the story really drew me in. I have been struggling so much to not give spoilers to people. I see people write in the comments all the time like, oh, this doesn't make sense, or like, that doesn't make sense. Or, for instance, the cultivation system. A lot of readers often say, Immortals seem like nothing in this novel. They're just like everywhere. I actually forget if this is a spoiler, so I can't say anything more. But you guys will see why the cultivation system is the way it is. What I really like also about NECRO is the way the author writes. There's not a lot of info dumping. So what I think is really unfortunate about a lot of Chinese web novels, and this is very different from English novels, properly edited and published, is that a lot of the authors have never really gone to school for writing or taken creative writing classes, etc., etc. So they don't necessarily always have the best or most effective writing techniques. And what a lot of Chinese web novel authors do is that in the first 50 chapters, where world building and introducing folks to characters, they do that by a ton and a ton and a ton of info dumps. Like exposition, that's an info dump. Narrative, that's an info dump about this world, about this cultivation system. So essentially, sometimes it kind of feels like you're reading a history book or something, or like a biography for a few chapters in the beginning. And so we obviously don't have that in NECRO. A lot of readers actually say that, oh my gosh, I wish we get a break sometimes. That we're going like 0 to 200 miles an hour in like 3 sentences. And I agree. Sometimes the action is very breakneck. It's very overwhelming. But it's right now, I like it, especially coming from SOTR where, things were a little bit wordy, but so far it's different. we are exposed to the world and learn more about the world and the people and places and things in it through the eyes of our main character, Lu Yun. And so we are presented with new information when he learns of it. And to me, that breaks it down in a much more manageable sense. So just think back to the whole Burial Mound arc, in which it was like a conspiracy within a conspiracy within a conspiracy. If we'd been presented with all of that at the very beginning, like before they entered, when Lu Ying thought, oh, I actually think this isn't a mountain. It's a huge ass tomb. And then we got like a chapter of exposition on why he thought it was. I think that would have been really boring, honestly. And it wouldn't have made the same impact as we got with their adventures just crazily running through everything. And essentially, that's why I picked Necro. Great story, great author, clear planning. I'm written into it. My character shows up around chapter 1300. And despite it being such a long novel, it is actually still shorter than SOTR. So similar chapter length, but the word count is about a third shorter. So that says a lot, I feel, in terms of filler and padding, stuff like that. Oh, and the other big thing is that I picked Necro because it seems to use a lot of cliches and a lot of tropes, especially from Shenxia web novels. But as you guys are slowly finding out, that may not be the case. And I can't talk about any of them because they'd be massive spoilers. How did the start of Necro feel compared to the start of SOTR? For those of you who don't know, SOTR is my novel that I just finished, Sovereign of the Three Realms. It is, just emotionally speaking, the starts are very different because I frankly didn't know what the heck I was doing with SOTR. I picked it just after discovering this industry, and well, it wasn't even an industry then. It was just some random blogs and forums online. That was it. So it was very much of a hobbyist and, let's just do something random, when I picked SOTR. And so I just picked whatever looked interesting. And you guys gotta say, the first couple of chapters for SOTR, they are very interesting. The main character dies because of a fart. You can't get more interesting than that in chapter 1. So that was fun. But then for Necro, it was much more, I knew what I was doing and I knew what I liked and I knew what I didn't like. So it was much more nuanced when I picked Necro. It was much more of a conscientious decision. Much more planning and thought went to it. Frankly, not that much thought went into SOTR. It looked fun. That was it. So that was it for emotional point of view. For the actual story itself, SOTR is very typical Xianxia. So you got your main character who starts off as the underdog. Everyone's wailing on him. Everyone's just keeping him down. But because of just who he is, he's the main character. He slowly shows off his brilliance and his special powers, and he rises and starts stomping face and kicking ass and taking names. So essentially, it's very standard, and you kind of know what you're getting into. It's comfort food. It's familiar, and you don't have to think too much about it, That's actually a good thing, too, because on the other hand, Necro is absolutely not your typical story, I feel. You get thrown into things, and you don't get much of an explanation before our, frankly, in my opinion, slightly socially awkward and immature main character goes herring off in search for adventure and pretty much lands himself in a ton of trouble and that he wouldn't have walked away from if he wasn't the main character. So things are really confusing and a jumble because he really didn't bother learning much of his new world before he rushed off to go on his first adventure. So it is definitely not comfort food. Because a lot of the things, and those of you who haven't read Necro, I so recommend you read it. It is a very, I would say, mind-bending start. There's a lot of stuff you have to pause and think about, and then a lot of plot twists, a lot of stuff that just turns stuff up on its head. If you I would say if you almost like detective stories, I think you'd like Necro, honestly. So, two vastly different starts to the novels. How do I request for a specific novel to be picked up by one of the translators here? One of the novels I was reading was partially translated and then dropped, and you've been waiting for 1.5 years now. Well, I also see that you say it was translated by Chidian. Sadly, I don't think Chidian is licensing out any of his content. So I don't think any of the translators here would be able to pick it up. Most of us, we pick novels that we like. So if the copyright doesn't belong to Tedium, then you can try to find the Wuxia World novel that you think is most similar to this novel that you want someone to pick up, and ask the translator if they're interested and if they'd like to pick it up. I will say though, and I will expand this answer out into more translating as a whole, it is very tough for a translator to pick up a novel that's already been partially translated, because there's just so much baggage that comes with that novel, whether in terms of you've already got a lot of existing terms and names from the previous translator. So then you got to decide, am I going to keep all those names and terms? Then the readers who are already reading it would be happy. But then, what if you don't agree with it? Then you're stuck using names that you really don't like. But then if you decide to do it all fresh from scratch, then you are not really going to get much interest until you get past the already translated chapters. And in fact, NECRO was previously translated. I think it was machine translated. And so what I did when I searched for novels was that I just read the ones I liked, and I also checked out to see if they'd already been translated or dropped. So when I saw that NECRO had been translated up to, I think, 20 some chapters, I actually did pause, because these thoughts were running through my head. I was like, oof, all right, baggage, I don't want to get caught in any drama, whether between translators, because we have turf wars too, or between just readership bases, readers saying, I like the old way better, or I like the new way, stuff like that. And there's the fact that I needed to get through 20 chapters of already existing content. And the fact that I actually changed the name of the novel entirely. So previously, the name of NECRO was very literally translated from Chinese. It was Immortal Tomb. So NECRO in Chinese is 2 characters. The first character is immortal, the second is tomb. So that's literally how they translated it. I did not agree with that, because then it sounded like a tomb that never died, which isn't quite what we're getting at here. We're getting at, lots of tombs for immortals, which is actually what it means in Chinese. So there was a bit of that struggle for me initially, but I decided I liked the story enough, so why the heck not? Do you think NECRO has the same sort of flair with words? Hard to tell with all the action and pacing. Also, how much of that flair is present in the original, and is it spruced up in the translation process? Great question. So I don't know if you guys could tell when I was doing the reading, but I even did the reading with a lot more, I think, emotion and flair than I did with the SOTR readings. NECRO is definitely different. It is written with more modern slang, partially because Lu Ying is transmigrated from Earth. So actually that gives me the freedom to use modern slang too. I'm throwing out curses, like modern curses, like motherfucker and stuff like that. Couldn't really do that in SOTR. It was all very ancient China. And honestly though, I will say that while the tone of NECRO is more modern, and hence I can use more popular culture relevant concepts to get stuff across. Actually, in the last chapter we just read, the thing about shitty teammates, I really wanted to use an esports term, but I couldn't, because I don't think Lu Ying was a gamer. But yeah, just stuff like that, I can use more modern concepts. But I will say though that I am an infinitely better writer and translator now than I was before, 4 years ago when I started SOTR. I do add a lot of flair, but I do not add stuff that isn't there. My flair is to do what I think would better convey the tone of what the author is writing. So the author, I think, is great in the sense that he writes a really good story. Like, his ideas are really good. But I can tell in his writing that he definitely isn't, say, classically trained, because he has a lot of writing crutches. So what I mean by writing crutches is that, for instance, overuse of certain terms or phrases. The author really likes to use gnashed his teeth. He uses it in like every single chapter, like 2 times or 3 times a chapter. So I followed that pretty religiously in the beginning, but now I'm like, okay, that's really enough. Like, everyone's gnashing their teeth and grinding their teeth all the time. Does anybody have any teeth left? So now I thought about it. Okay, so what does it mean when they're gnashing their teeth all the time? It means a certain emotion, especially given the situation they're in. And maybe they're nervous or they're angry or they're tense. So what I'm doing now is I'm conveying the emotion that the characters are feeling, but I'm not using the words gnashing their teeth all the time. Because seriously, they're not going to have any teeth left by at the end of chapter 50. I might do stuff like tensed his jaw or clenched his fists even, or looked grimly into the darkness. Stuff like that. Because while repetition is more of a thing in Chinese writing and it's more acceptable there, it's not really a thing in English writing. I hate it when I see stuff like, he chuckled, repeated 10,000 times in a page. I'm like, come on, don't you have any creativity? And I skip over the word at the end, so I'm not really getting anything new out of it. So I will say I do put in quite a bit of flair, but I don't add anything, and I still stick to strictly presenting the emotions that the author is trying to get across. The emotions, the atmosphere, the action. I'm just doing it in a way that I think would do it more efficiently. For instance, like Gelong and his rolling head. So I write roll, 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 and folks really love it. It's turned into an inside joke, the flying headset. I love it. But in the Chinese, the author actually wrote a sound effect that, if translated into English, wouldn't really make sense. The pinyin is 咕咚. That's how we say stuff fell to the ground and rolled away in Chinese. 咕咚. So if I did that in pinyin, obviously you guys would be like, what the heck is that? It's pinyin. All right, great. I don't get it. If I translated it to what it usually would be translated as, it would be like drop. Or drop, essentially. That's not very descriptive, in English. You'd be like, okay, so his head dropped to the ground. We're not getting the whole rolling action, because that's what his head does. I'd be like, okay, did his head smash against the ground? Did it bounce? Or I don't get it. So there I changed it into roll, roll, roll to better get the stuff across. And you guys can just compare it to the machine translation to see how much I add, how much is me. I add in terms of making it more enjoyable to read in English, but again, I'm not adding or making stuff up. We're fairly good with English and would love to help with some editing during this time. How do I suppose you should go about it? If possible, you'd like to continue helping in the future, as that would keep your English skills up. Okay, well, I think you should reach out, and this is for anyone, if you want to be a proofreader, if you want to be an editor, if you just want to get involved in the scene whatsoever, you should reach out to the translators you like and see if you can help them. Not all translators are recruiting for their teams. I personally am not. I don't really recruit people for my teams. I will fully admit I'm very opinionated about my writing, so I don't really open it up to a lot of people. And I refuse to let my editor really make liberal changes. I feel so bad. I'm glad he's not on right now. But not all translators are like me by far. They would be much more open to outside help. I did take on Nabuk before. He is the proofreader for Alice Chu. So Alice Chu, they recently launched Virtue, the new VR MMORPG novels. And what he did, I hadn't expected to take him on. But what he did was he compiled a list of just general punctuation, typos, etc. errors for a few chapters and then just sent them all to me. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, you really are a reader and you like the novel and you've got some good points. Hey, do you want to be a proofreader? So proactive action like that. Where do I find the raws for NECRO? NECRO is a 17K novel, so you will find them on 17k.com. And this is a great time to show for my other novel. By the way, guys, I also translate Return of the Swallow, which is also a 17K novel. And my long-term readers will know that I shill for my other novel any chance I get. So you guys should also read Return of the Swallow. And that's kind of most everything I had planned for today. This is just a fun celebration to really kick off the official launch of NECRO. In case you guys don't know, NECRO is now chugging ahead at 2 chapters a day. So you get your updates at noon and midnight GMT +8 or US EST. And there are tiers available for sponsorships. So if you like to read ahead, if you think 2 chapters a day is not fast enough, go ahead and sponsor. That is also the only way I'll make money. So please sponsor. By the way, something fun that's happening is a Twitter Q&A that I'm participating on. So I'm part of this Chinese diaspora group on Twitter, and we are doing a public Q&A today, but it's essentially a public Q&A involving 10 translators. We all hail from different aspects of the industry. You've got me, who I do web novels. You've also got the translators of the new Jingyang translation, The Legends of the Condor Heroes. So Gigi Chang is part of that thread as well. You guys are free to ask them questions or see just how other people approach their work. And in fact, already got a question from another translator on how they translate Jingdan, which is golden core. For long-term readers, it'll be like, I know golden core. So I'm giving a quick Xianxia primer. And by the way, I also do participate in the Moonquill Podcast. If you guys want to listen to more podcasts over the weekend, we talk about industry gossip or writing tips. If those of you are in chat who want to write your own novel. We also have actually wuxia selections. It's my own feature that I host when I talk about wuxia, what is xianxia, and all this, what is it that we read. So yeah, thank you all for tuning in.